I'd like to welcome everyone back, those in the Harris Hall and those online, to the continuation of the Board of County Commissioners regular meeting. It's Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. We have some excited faces in the audience today, and we're enthusiastic to do our next 2 hours with our policy board. It's item 14 on our agenda. Just a little intro that I put together that I wanted the public to know. Since 2018, the Policy Lab has been a creative and developmental partnership between the county and the University of Oregon to bring the talent of students into local government for policy research, applications, and in my words, out-of-the-box ideas. This program addresses complex issues and gives the students real-world experiences and how matters into governmental systems, uses their processes and presentations, and also they can learn some debate and how to get things moved. So thank you for participating in that. The board will also be participating in these presentations in the formal dais mode for the first couple presentations, and then we'll transition into the Board of County Commissioners conference room for the next number of hours that we're going to be involved in this, to give you both the experience of formal and an informal presentation. So if I stole your thunder, Mr. Mokraiski, forgive me for that. I figured that was part of the gig. And with us, Ms. Mokraiski, have you anything to add? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, thank you, Chair. That's great. I was going to share some similar sentiments, and I'll just say this is one of my favorite meetings of the year when we get to hear from students at the University of Oregon. This partnership that we have had with the University of Oregon and the 3 p.m. program since 2018 is at 7, or I guess we're going on 8 years here. Every year it gets stronger, more robust, more impactful, I think, to us, Lane County. You know, this is sort of a win-win, mutual benefit type partnership where we get the talent and expertise and skills of the students and faculty in the 3 p.m. program, and the students and faculty get access to pursue solutions to challenges that we're facing here in Lane County. And so it's really a wonderful partnership. We've benefited greatly from it, and we're so excited again today. Each year we have this opportunity to hear from the students that have dove into a number of really critical real-world challenges that we're facing here in Lane County. And so we're excited to hear the fruits of their labor. And I just want to recognize a few folks. Greg Rickoff, our Assistant County Administrator, Steve Adams, our Policy Director, and Jeff Kincaid, our Senior Operations Analyst on the county side, have been the 3 individuals who really have just leaned into this partnership, along with then on the university side, Ben Clark, who's here from the University of Oregon in the 3 p.m. program, and Aniko. I joke with Aniko that we're on a first name basis. She doesn't have to try to pronounce my name if I don't have to try to pronounce her.
Fair enough.
Well, one of these days we're gonna have like a sit down and we'll actually have that conversation, phonetically spelling out. But Ben and Aniko and Josh Bruce as well from the University of Oregon are our core key partners and the faculty there in really making this project in this partnership so robust. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve and Ben and Aniko to introduce the projects and talk a little bit more in setting that up for you all, but just so happy to have our partners here today.
Great.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I really appreciate the opportunity to join this panel this morning to introduce what I think will be among some of the more fun presentations that you will have the opportunity to enjoy from staff. As the Chair so ably articulated, we've got 2 sessions here. The students that will be presenting to you for the first 2 have been working on projects for 2 quarters, and these are capstone projects. The balance are a 1 quarter, so kind of more of a quick and dirty piece of work, and they cover a wide range of issues. You'll see that each of the issues that the students have been working on are emblematic of things that come to you on a regular basis, things like workforce challenges that we struggle with from an economic development perspective, childcare policy. Our own economic development staff have been before you to present on some of those challenges. And you're going to hear issues around better coordination on emergency management, communications related activities, and even some of the root causes around juvenile justice that some of our own staff are looking at and beginning to see some of root causes there associated with potentially brain injury. These are really important pieces of work, the collaboration between the County of Lane and the University of Oregon. We are incredibly fortunate to have this world-class research institution right here in our backyard. We have the opportunity as staff to engage on campus. Professor Clark has made that opportunity available to us to come meet with students. I find that incredibly rewarding. And we've had the opportunity to have students come join our workforce. Two of the presenters today have been working within the policy division over the last last few months, one of whom had a pretty big hand in getting a bill passed and signed by the governor associated with the Mapleton Water District issue, which we've talked about specifically. And I spent, and that's of course Mason Bartholomew, who presented to you previously. Sienna Fitzpatrick, who you're going to hear from this morning as well, I was with her in the Capitol on Monday working on issues, and they will be graduating and joining the city of Springfield in the Economic Development Department here in just a little bit. So the ties that bind the staff together here, the education, the pipeline, the talent is tremendous. I will say, finally, this is a week of transition in my personal life. I have two daughters. One graduated from high school 2 days ago, and the other graduates from college this coming weekend. So it is a season in which I have heard many graduation speeches, all of the ones cliched or otherwise. But it is a moment of great hope. I am seeing tremendous promise and talent, and I'm just blown away by the quality of humanity that we have coming into these ranks. And so we are really honored to be able to present this work for you. With that, I'm going to turn that over to our project partner, Professor Clark.
Chair Lovell, commissioners, I want to thank the board for its continued support of the Policy Lab. Since its inception, as we've heard in 2018, the Policy Lab has allowed us to aspire and reach to a different kind of relationship between the University of Oregon and Lane County. The School of Planning, Public Policy, and Management, which I'm the director and a professor in, we were delighted to be able to honor Lane County's partnership with our school at our annual award ceremony last month for Outstanding Community Partner. The award recognizes the partners whose collaboration has gone above and beyond simple transactions. In really what it celebrates a relationship that's built on a mutual investment, where our students, our faculty, and our community leaders come together to address real-world problems, which the Steves here have talked about. And we're able to learn from each other with this and work towards building a better future for our community. Lane County, the County Administrator's Office, and directors of so many of the county's departments are what I would call a dream partner. They not only welcome our students into their world of public service, but they treat them as colleagues, as co-creators, and future leaders, and that is so appreciated and surprisingly rare. And as you're probably quite well aware, we've tackled a lot of really pressing issues through this partnership that are facing our region. And you'll hear presentations today as Steve has talked about some of those projects already. But what we're able to do is really leverage the best of both of our organizations in a way that helps our students become those future leaders that we so desperately need. And this partnership has really become a model, not just here locally, but something that I think others around the state and nationally are seeing. In fact, Administrator Mokrajewski and I had an opportunity to travel to Washington, D.C. in February to share what this partnership between 3PM and Lane County means, and I think hopefully inspired some others around the Big Ten Conference and around the country of what a real university local government partnership can look like. It's a relationship that's rooted in trust, sustained by our shared values, and driven by our common goals, which is to make Oregon more resilient, equitable, and a thriving place. It's an example of what makes Oregon inspiring. So thank you again for your continued support. It means so much to the school, to our students, to our faculty. I'm going to turn it over to Aniko to talk a little bit more about the projects that you'll see in this room. And I will note that the second shift of projects will be coming from a public management class, much smaller in scope, very formative in their nature, and sometimes those projects end up coming back the next year in a bigger, brighter, more robust fashion. So, Annika.
Good morning, Chair Lovell and Commissioners. Thanks for having us back again year after year. It's great to be here. I am the instructor for the capstone course, which is the two presentations we're going to hear first this morning down here. So I just want to give a little bit of context for the class and introduce the projects. So this is the two-term capstone experience for our Master of Public Administration students. They have worked very hard for 2 years through other coursework, and then they get to me in capstone and really get to dig in on a project for about 6 months. So they've been working on this since the beginning of January, and they've done great work in reaching out to partners and data scraping and lots of fun things that they'll tell you more about in their presentations. The two that we're hearing this morning are about Lane County's pathways for the workforce in two particular sectors that you'll hear more about. And I want to acknowledge that this one was also in partnership with Lane Workforce Partnership, and we have Ryan joining us today too, so he can answer any questions as well as the team. And then the second project you'll be hearing about this morning is about childcare policy within the organization of Lane County. So they were working with James, and I think James is James here too?
Back.
Yay! So those are the two projects, and I want to acknowledge we had a third one too that was working with the city of Oak Ridge. They presented to the council last week about options for the Willamette Activity Center for when it hopefully eventually reopens in 2028 as a resilience hub and a community hub for the Oak Ridge. So they had a successful presentation last week around that. So these are the capstone presentations. I'm really excited for you to hear about them, and then we'll transition into hearing a little bit about a new club that started this year, and we'll tell you more about that upstairs, and then we'll hear some of Ben's public management presentations. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to the students. Thanks.
All right, well, good morning. Typically, I introduce a portion of it, but I don't really know what you're talking about, but it's the number one item, the Lane County Workforce Support System gap analysis. And I would assume, I don't have the names, but your name, sir, is?
Agustín Olivares Lucero.
Are you the one in charge of your staff? Would you want to introduce this item and introduce your staff?
Actually, she's in charge.
Okay, well, there you go. Well, I'm always going left to right. Forgive me. So please go ahead. If you want to introduce your staff and your subject, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Commissioner and other commissioners, for having us here. We're very excited to be here. My name's Ren. These are my teammates and peers, Jasper and Augustine. We're Master of Public Administration students here to present on Lane County's workforce. As Aniko said, this was done with Lane Workforce Partnership as our client and the University of Oregon's Institute for Policy Research and Engagement. So I will start us off with a quick agenda. I'll go over our scope of work and some introductory information, as well as a workforce landscape of Lane County. Then we'll have our two specific sector analyses, and then we'll have a comparative analysis, and we will end with recommendations and further research before we go into our Q&A. So the first point that I would really like to target is the why behind this work. There are so many people living and working in Lane County that face financial instability because their jobs do not supply them with what they need in order to meet their basic needs and to sustain themselves and their families. So our purpose within this project was to get residents of Lane County financial stability through the tool of workforce development. Our goal over the last 6 months was to use that workforce development lens to identify economically sustained pathways and career pathways to get as many people out of poverty through different flowchart visualizations and get them into higher paying wages and better job placements. So when talking about poverty in Lane County, the focus point of this project was ALICE populations. ALICE is defined as asset limited, income constrained, and employed. As I stated, these are folks that are already working, but they don't have enough in their salaries to sustain themselves and their families. We have 2 key sectors that we will go into. There are many sectors, and it's important to note how many sectors there are in Lane County that have economically viable pathways to better jobs and higher wages. This project did originally start with 12 of those sectors, then it went down to 6, and eventually we landed on the 2 that we believed had the best opportunities with entry-level roles. And not only that, they also offer community benefits as well. Getting people into healthcare and housing helps stimulate affordable housing options, better healthcare, and just a more equitable landscape in Lane County. For our methodology, we had a mixed methods approach by way of flowchart visualizations. The flowcharts are going to map different career pathways within these 2 sectors. All of them have targets such as entry-level roles, training opportunities, and advancement criteria. These flowcharts were developed with primary sources such as the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and the U.S. Census. So the specifics of the workforce landscape were important for us to understand because we wanted to know the demographics and what the ALICE population brought to the workforce. So within this report, there's 2 different thresholds that we paid attention to when defining what ALICE meant. In order to be an individual that's defined as ALICE, people needed to be making at or less than $47,673 annually. In order to be a household that was defined as ALICE, that number was $63,419. The reason why this is such a pressing issue is because 33% of households in Lane County are defined within this ALICE criteria. Another reason why we have these 2 primary sectors is because when going into what these ALICE populations currently are working in, we found that the roles that these people currently hold are respectively in the healthcare and the housing industries. Specifically, 28.1% work in healthcare and social services, whereas 22.7% of these folks hold roles in construction and administrative services. So, to get us started, we'll have the healthcare sector first. The healthcare sector in Lane County as of 2023 was the largest in terms of employment and total payroll. They employed almost 22,000 people, which accounts for just over 12% of the total workforce. This graphic is going to show the current employment rates for some of the different roles that we have in our career clusters as of 2024. It's important to note this graphic does not account for the demand or the projected demand of the roles. This is simply just the current employment rates. At a glance, we can see that we have home health and personal care aides that are on the higher end, and paramedics are a bit on the lower end. You'll see more specifics about these roles in our flowcharts. Moving forward, for the average annual salary in these roles, it's sitting at about $72,389. We can see where those specific roles lie on that average, but it is well above both of our thresholds. Looking forward, this industry is expected to grow in the next decade. Healthcare is expected to add about 3,000 new roles by 2032, which is a 15% increase in roles. Another reason why we chose this as one of our primary sectors. We see a lot of growth in healthcare. We see a lot of opportunity for advancement with people getting into these careers. Moving forward, I'm going to pass it off to Jasper, who's going to start with our flowcharts.
Excellent. Thank you, Ren. So what we have here on the screen, if you'll all be willing to tilt your heads to the left, is a model of the flowcharts that we created. We could see here up at the top, we have average annual wages. And the way the flowcharts work is we have what we call the entry-level criteria here, and then it flows into different jobs, and then those jobs, hopefully, progress to higher paying jobs as well. We mapped here with the dashed lines the 2 ALICE thresholds. There could be more thresholds on the graph. As you can see, this is for 2 adults both working plus 2 kids. You could have 1 adult working, 1 not working, and 1 kid, but those would just be different dashed lines. And for the sake of clarity, we decided not to show each one of those on the map. Going into, this is for home care in Lane County. To go into home care, you must be 18 years or older, pass a background check, and legally be able to work in the United States. One other thing about looking at entry level for home care is those entry level requirements. We can see here that there's actually no education requirements to go into this career cluster. While unfortunately the beginning careers are quite below the individual ALICE threshold, we can see that through doing things like a professional development certificate, additional training and coursework, you can eventually get up above the individual ALICE threshold. This is emergency services in Lane County, the paramedic that Ren mentioned earlier. High school degree or equivalent isn't necessary here to then progress. For sake of time, we'll go forward, but if you all want to revisit or ask questions about these, please feel free to at the end. And this is my favorite slide. It's actually my backup plan if nothing works out after I graduate. But this is the nursing career cluster, and what I really like about this is it shows the different options for people if they wanted to get into nursing to get above these ALICE thresholds. And one way you can go down here is get a BSN, a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. And that takes 4 years, and it would take about $80,000 in student debt to get. But you do get immediately above the ALICE threshold with a registered nurse with a BSN. However, if you don't want $80,000 in debt or don't get scholarships or have some other way of funding it, there is options at Lane Community College. There's a 6 to 12-week program that's around $1,000 to become a certified nursing assistant. And from there, there's bridge programs to eventually become a registered nurse with no BSN. But most employers do find a way to help people achieve their BSN. And Lane County is actually, Lane Community College is developing a program right now for an RN to BSN program. And this is dentistry. For the sake of time, we'll just continue. Here you go.
Perfect, thank you. So moving forward, now we'll go into our housing sector analysis. Like healthcare, the housing sector has many opportunities for entry-level roles, and additionally, it helps create more housing options for residents of Lane County. So when talking about housing, these are the current employment rates for our different housing roles in Lane County. As of 2024, they employed about 8,000 folks. This is important to note because while it is less than healthcare, in 2011, this sector employed about 5,000 people. So we do see sustained growth, and we do see demand growing for people getting into this industry. The average annual salary for housing roles in Lane County sits at about $66,400. Again, this is higher than both of our identified thresholds, and we can see where those different roles fall on this line. Projected demand for this is also going to grow in the next 10 years. Something specific that we looked at when talking about housing roles is the labor intensity of the roles and just the nature of being a construction laborer. It ensues that there's a lot of replacement openings and people moving outside of those labor-intensive roles. So in the next 10 years, we expect to see about 7,000 replacement roles as people move out of the labor-intensive and into more higher management. And so there'll be more room for entry-level opportunities for people as well as new roles added. And I'll hand it off back to Jasper for some more flowcharts.
This is Ren's backup plan. For brevity's sake, this will be the only construction flowchart we go over. I'll briefly show the other ones as well. The interesting thing for the skilled trades, I will note there are more skilled trades than are shown here. However, again, for the simplicity of the graphic, we decided just to show these three, electrician, plumbing, and line workers, because the other skilled trades have very, very similar career pathways. And so the only thing here that I will note is that there's these apprenticeship programs that people are required to get into to become an apprentice and then eventually become a journey person in electrician or plumbing or line working. And these are what we would call bottleneck zones. It's an area of further research that could be done in this, but there is high demand for these apprenticeships, but there's limited spots for them. And so we would call these bottlenecks in the flowcharts. We also looked at construction here as well and how it can get us above these individual ALICE thresholds, what we call maintenance and operations. And here I'll just note that these flow charts we almost think of as biological, because the careers within each one can overlap with other careers and other clusters that we've identified. And so we're definitely not saying that these are hard and rigid definitions for these flow charts, but they're the best way that we came to define these for now. But they are definitely open to changes as the state of the workforce in Lane County changes as well, and career pathways can shift.
Now, in order to say which career clusters are the best pathway out of poverty, we decided to conduct a comparative analysis where we define 4 different questions. The first one is which career clusters offers lowest barriers to entry. The second one is which career clusters offers highest long-term earning potential. The third one is which career cluster has more accessible training pathways. And finally, we define the question that's which career clusters offers the best pathway out of poverty. It's important to mention that the first 3 questions will guide us to answer the fourth one. So we defined 5 different criteria to answer those questions. The first one is education required. That is highly connected to lower barriers to entry. The second one is certification required. That is also highly related to lower barriers to entry. The third one is time taking, which means how long does it take to get the title or to get the job title, and is highly related to accessible training pathways. And the last 2 are mainly related about money. For example, the first one is wages, how much I'm gonna get at the end of the journey. And the last one that we barely seen is about expenses, which means how much do I have to invest in order to get my job title. And that one is highly related to highest long-term earning potential. For sake of time, I'm just gonna go over 2 career clusters. The first one, for example, could be the one on top, that is home care. It requires, it doesn't require a lot of education. It doesn't require a high school degree or GED equivalent, and it doesn't require a lot of certifications. So most of the time for this career cluster, you can get while you're working, you can get a training. So it kind of offers really low barriers to entry. And for example, in the housing sector, we have, I'm gonna talk about the one at the bottom, trades. It takes time. It takes time to become a plumber, to become a line worker. So it takes time, but at the same time, at the end of that, you can get enough to kind of get out of poverty, in this case, get out of the ALICE threshold. But at the same time, it requires money investment. But at the same time, you can have a tuition reimbursement. So it's kind of like, it has pros and cons, but at the end, we consider that it's a good way to get out of poverty. And then, in order to answer the final question, which was what's the best pathway out of poverty, we can acknowledge that for example, in the healthcare sector, we have home care and emergency health services as a good option because they present a low barrier to entry. So it's not that hard to get the job, and at the same time, you can get a rapid progression. As Jasper was mentioning, you don't make a lot of money at the beginning, but you can have this rapid progression to get to a point where you can actually make money to cover your living expenses. At the same time, it's important to acknowledge that even when nursing takes a lot of time, because you need the education, you need to get your education, you need to invest a lot of money. At the end of the journey, you can make a lot. So it is important to acknowledge that even when it takes a long time to get that job title, it's a good option anyway. So it's gonna be up to the person if the person is willing to invest time into getting a degree, where at the end of the journey can make money or not, or people can just get into the home care or emergency health services positions where they can develop a rapid progression. On the other hand, in the housing sector, we consider that maintenance and operations is a good option because it doesn't it only requires a high school degree or a GED equivalent, and that's going to be it. So it presents a low barrier to entry, and at the same time, you can develop a rapid progression. But at the same time, we consider that trades is a good option. As I mentioned to you, it requires certification, an apprenticeship. It requires a high school diploma or GED equivalent, but at the same time, you can secure a strong long-term earning potential. At the same time, you can have a high wage. So we consider that that one within the housing sector is a good option. And it is important to acknowledge too that all these things or employability will depend on the availability of training, certifications, and support services. And at the same time, apprenticeships, community college programs, and other educational trainings are helpful for career progressions, but are not accessible to all residents. So it is important to acknowledge that, as Ren was mentioning, we'll need to have more availability in these two sectors to give people a job. I'm gonna pass it back to Ren.
Thank you. So for our recommendations, the first one is simply promoting awareness of these career pathways. This means expanding and getting multiple communication sources out and also making them multilingual to make sure that they're equitable, to just get people information about opportunities within different career pathways. Secondly, our other recommendation is investing in data and evaluation. This entails creating a centralized data platform that tracks job retention, wage advancement, as well as different job placements, and then using that centralized data to expand upon these flowcharts. As Jasper said, they are biological by nature, so they can change year by year, and making them more usable in that way. And also with investing in data and getting that information, you can use that to inform funding decisions about workforce development. And then lastly, partnering with training and educational organizations. This is where we would love to see our flowcharts be used as visual aids for folks. As I mentioned before, there were originally 12 sectors that we looked at. There's a lot more flowcharts that could be made. There's a lot more work to be done. And having those flowcharts in different kind of outreach opportunities, working with Lane Community College to make sure that the certification and curricula programs also align with labor market demands is really important to make sure that we are using that data and using our funding to ensure that we're investing in the correct different pathways.
And just to wrap up, we've had a really great time doing this research, and we think there's a lot more research that could be done that we unfortunately didn't have the time to go into. We sort of broke those into what we call refining the existing analyses and also new research directions as well. So with refinement, that just implies like clarifying the career transitions, assessing how the ALICE population's current experiences can be used to get into different jobs, improving the wage data accuracy, and incorporating something that we never quite figured out, but incorporating a time dimension to the flowcharts to really accurately show how long does it take to get from one to the other rather than just having a dash saying like 4 years or so. And then the new research, as we've all mentioned now, expanding the flowcharts, identifying bottlenecks, estimating job availability, and understanding barriers to entry and progression. So thank you all very much for your time today and your attention. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Very well done. Are we allowed to applaud in this meeting at any time? We certainly want to, but we're restricted in doing that, but well done. To the board, any questions or any comments to the staff that did such a great job?
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead. This is loose.
You know, your flowcharts are astounding.
Yeah.
And I like your future research is to refine the existing analysis and expand the flowcharts, adding timeframes, et cetera. Wow. I think you've developed a product there that's very usable, all ready to go. I mean, you've got a package, sell it, man. That's your job. No need to have a backup plan. So very well done. I've taken as many notes as I could, took some photographs, and I think you've got a marketable piece right there. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the work. it's, we proliferate here, well, these jobs would be great to be able to get into, especially apprenticeship programs, right, in the trades. And we know that they lead to higher wage jobs, but how do we translate that into people who are looking for better employment at higher wages and actually getting into the programs that lead to wages that can lead them out of poverty? So the application of your flow charts and the research that you've done is really helpful for places like Lane Workforce, agencies that work directly with the people that are looking to seek a better life, ultimately. This is all about being able to have a better life and a better quality of life. So remembering, okay, these are real human beings behind the flow chart that want to do better for their families, and we as a community really want them to live and work in our community and make ourselves a more holistic kind of place to live. So I'm trying to find a ways or how we can help incorporate the research that you've done into programs like Lane Workforce or other agencies where they can really show them when they're sitting down or doing an intake with a potential person that wants to find a better job. Okay, these are your available pathways to these different jobs. Of course, you want a job that interests you and is a passion for you. And here's the pathway that you can get in order to reach a job that you love, but also pays enough to feed you and your families. So thank you very much for this work. I think it's really applicable and can lead to being able to translate that to people in our community.
Thank you.
Commissioner Trujillo.
Thank you. Well, first, congratulations to all of you, because you're at a really significant point in your lives, and you've done a lot of work, and you're only presenting a teeny little slice of the totality of your work and a teeny little slice of this slice of your work. And so I just want to really appreciate and respect and acknowledge how far you've come, how much you've been working, and for how long and so hard. And thank you for doing some of your work with us at Lane County. It's always, as I think our administrator said, one of the best meetings of the year is when we get to hear back from Policy Lab, so thank you. I was also really excited to hear that you actually started with 12 sectors, and I don't know if that means you did this work for 12 sectors, but you're only presenting 2, or you just identified and then you went into 6 and then 2?
Chair Level, Commissioner Trieger, thank you. We identified the 12 and we only had time for the 2.
Got it. Because, of course, people have to want to do a particular kind of work. Not everybody wants to go into these roles. So hopefully maybe somebody else will pick up the other 10 sectors that you didn't have time for and use your model. It's a great template. That's what's so beautiful about this particular approach that you took, is you created a template that you can then kind of plug others into. So that's really useful that we haven't even realized yet. I thought it was especially fascinating that the home care and personal care roles were at the top of the number of positions and then flipped to the bottom of the wage scale. It was not a surprise to me. Those have always and historically been the lowest wage jobs, and also because that workforce is historically and still remains mostly filled by women and immigrants and women of color. And so that is a sort of a structural problem that your graph really just brings to light. And so hopefully seeing things like that will also help folks address some of those more structural and systemic issues. I also wondered if you did any sort of crosswalking with the 2 sectors that you selected have large sectors of or large segments of those sectors that are union represented and some that are not, and there's a huge difference in total compensation package and job satisfaction and retention depending on whether the workforce is represented or not. Did you have any time to look at a sort of crosswalk of that?
Yes, Chair, Commissioner. One of the sources for the wage data was labor contracts that we looked at, and I think it's telling that the nursing career cluster and the skilled trades career cluster had some of the highest paying jobs. And so we definitely did look at that. I wouldn't say that we did any more in-depth analysis on the impact of labor contracts in this report, but it's a great point that you made.
Great. Just in terms of, again, structural, if the idea is some long-term economic stability for households and therefore the communities that they're in, that's just such an important component of the workforce experience. Thank you. And then the last thing, the timeline piece is really illustrative of the barrier. And I know some of those, it's like traditionally it's a 4-year program, but some people can accelerate that. But some people have to extend it out. They have caregiving responsibilities or they're juggling jobs and school, and it takes 6 years to achieve a 4-year program. So that is a great visual, but also keeping in mind maybe if there's an opportunity for somebody else that picks up your work and expands on it to sort of asterisk some of those of where there's opportunities, and ultimately what the savings to the person attaining that certification, or right, because the time is money. So if you can achieve a 4-year program in 2 years, it might save money in some ways. It might not. That would be another really interesting way to sort of slice and dice and have people understand what a path looks like. So really just great work, so practical and useful. And like I said, I love that what you've created is kind of a template that you can plug in other sectors. That's really super useful too. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Yes. Thank you. Great presentation. And I'm glad at the end you had the part where we would like to deep dive into this, because those were my questions. And as my colleagues here said, Commissioner Buck, I was sitting here thinking, I'm also on a school board, like this would be so valuable to have at the school level. Our college counselors, if they had these flow charts and you could just show the kids, like, here are your pathways. Not everybody wants to do a 4-year, and these are good careers you could go be successful in. As Mr. Adams, I have 2 daughters, and one is currently doing her prereqs for nursing, and my wife is a hygienist, so it would have been hilarious to see that as a competition up there, because she wanted her to be a hygienist, but she's doing nursing, I think, just because her mom wanted her to be a hygienist. But it's a hilarious conversation around the dinner table to have them listen to. This is a template. This could go on forever. I was just sitting here looking at all the possibilities and where you could just take an absolute deep dive into. The first one I was thinking of was the bottlenecks. You pointed out some of those bottlenecks and solutions for those. One of the points of contention between union and non-union is the apprenticeship and how hard it is for some to start an apprenticeship, and what kind of solutions are out there. It depends on who you talk to, so it would really be interesting to have someone unbiased take a look at that and say, hey, this is how you could do it, why aren't you doing this, or these are barriers and this is why you can't do it. So if anybody's listening that wanted to pick something up, that would be a great topic. And then Ren, well, it could be anybody, but you said we need to get this information in front of people. Did you guys workshop at all? Because one of the issues the county faces is getting information out there. The information's there. We send it out as many ways as we think people pay attention, and it's incredible how many people still haven't heard. This is new to us. Did you guys look into that at all?
Yeah, Chair Level, Vice Chair, thank you. So we actually had some expert interviews that were incorporated when informing our flow charts. We talked with an individual from Homes for Good, she's an HR individual who works in housing. Her name's Bailey. She was wonderful. And so we talked to her and she saw our flow charts, and we're hoping that there can be some work with her moving forward. We also talked to 2 individuals from Peace Health. So that was part of our analysis, kind of getting it out with different services around. And when we presented to our client, Lane Workforce Partnership, we presented to their board, and someone from Lane Community College was there, and she asked a couple questions about, how this would be applicable in an education reform, how we could use it in kind of talking to different support services. So while we haven't actually sent out the flowcharts to any support services, we have connections in kind of doing this project and with Ryan and Lane Workforce Partnership that we hope they can be used moving forward.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you. Sure.
Thank you again. Yeah, Augustine, Jasper, and Ren, you did a great job. I always gauge things, just for those in the future, I gauge things by how many times people say. Nice job. You didn't say very, very much, so good for you. All right. The thing is that I looked at the bottleneck zones that Vice Chair mentioned were an interesting part of me that piqued my interest, and that, tough times, when people have to get into those. And I'm just kind of wondering, as I started looking at all of the sectors and the comments that you've made, I gravitated toward more of a mental health kind of picture view of this. And so I wrote down this: I'd love to see a few other employment sector leaders in our county, for one. It'd be great if we had government and healthcare not being our top two, and if we had some other sector we were creating some more momentum with, I think that would certainly help. But then the thing about this mental part was, how long does it take to flow through the pathways? You asked that question. But in my mind, I'm answering that by saying, well, it depends on the person's drive, desire, and passion. So how do we fuel that? So you look at some of the, can't keep track anymore, N, Generation X, Y, Z, whatever. I mean, you go through the alphabet, right? But I believe that we're looking at this generation here, and I think this generation here, if I'm not mistaken, is a little bit more more passionate and more on the ball, and wants to get things done and see things a little bit like, I want to get out of my mom's basement kind of an attitude. Is that accurate, would you say? In your, this is totally off the ball question here, but I'm just kind of curious, because that mental part is a big deal in employment.
Yeah, Chair Lovell, thank you. I actually want to give a shout out to Jasper on this question. He's taken pretty much all the prereqs to be a nurse and then totally switched and decided to go into public administration. And I think that just goes to show how people can switch just based on their interests. People can do something for a while and then completely change. And I think that is a really wonderful part of the workforce, is that we have so many people with different skills that you can bring into different areas. And something that, when talking about the ALICE population, is, as I mentioned at the very beginning, they have skills, they have roles that are within important sectors like social services, like administrative services. And I think, as you're saying, kind of tying into their passions and showing them that they can be empowered to do whatever they want. It's not all about money, it's about kind of finding fulfillment in your role. I think that is a big part of just the mental battle that you have to really get over. And a big part of this master's program too is we've learned a lot about getting over that mental battle and knowing that, we want to do something to make the world better. We want to kind of make Oregon better, or wherever we end up. And I think that that's something that we could definitely incorporate into work like this.
Yeah, well, great job, Jasper, and all of you for, knowing that you have the wherewithal and the deposits in you to shift gears if need be, continuing with those passions and not giving up. There's an old saying that says, don't go weary in doing good, because rewards will always come. So good on you for that. The last thing I just wanted to say is, when we look at that goal that you had of getting past the ALICE threshold, I think that was a really great standardized start to your whole research, because it gave you a fixed idea of what you had to answer questions around. So I think that was really well presented. And then the last thing that you just mentioned too, Ren, a little bit, is how do we invest in the idea that people who have had a tough time still have those deposits in them to take a step forward and say yes to whatever is next, even if it's difficult, with people behind them, mentoring them through the process to get to the pathway of success. I think that's really where a lot of this lies. So, Justine, any final comments? You were leaning in there for a second, just wondering.
Chair, yes, I do. I mean, if we have time, I just wanted to add something about what you were asking, this mental health and how people choose to go to one place or to another. I feel that I was talking about this when we presented, I don't remember if it was last week or the week before that, to Lane Workforce. It's important to understand how our community behaves. So it's important to understand why they're gonna choose one or the other. I come from South America, from Chile, where I've seen that people decide to not go to college because they've seen their parents working since they were born. And then they are like, I just want to do this because my family does it, so I'm kind of going to keep doing this family business. Or there are people that are like, I just when I get out of here, I want to get a degree. So we need to kind of complement this research with that kind of like qualitative aspect where we can understand the behavior of our community and understand how we can approach them in a good way. How can we engage them to understand that these things are a good way to get out of poverty? That's all I wanted to add, Chair.
Well said. Thank you for sharing that. Great job. Anything else from the board before we move on to the next item? Well done. Again, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This one is item number 2, a childcare policy review and recommendations for Lane County. It has Mason, Quinn, Wyatt in here and whoever is the one that speaks first, please go ahead and introduce your item and go forth and conquer.
Oh, yes. Test. Chair Lovell, Vice Chair Siniga, Lane County Commissioners, good morning. I'm Mason Bartholomew. My colleagues here are Quinn Hout and Wyatt Bean. Our project will be looking at childcare solutions for Lane County. To start things off with our agenda, we will be going over our project purpose and how exactly we jump-started this project, a bit of a background of the current state of childcare in Lane County, as well as a data analysis portion that we conducted, and recommendations followed by barriers to those, and concluding with next steps. Starting off with our project purpose, we were given the client of Lane County government. We were asked to identify gaps specifically in childcare within the county and then propose solutions for those gaps. Well, as we are individuals who do not have children, we want to know, why is this important? Well, from an individual who commented from our survey, which we will get into later in the presentation, they discussed about how childcare, even being from saying $1,200 to $1,400 a month, is still expensive. Taking into consideration, for example, Lane County's fiscal year report 2024 to 2025, the median income annually was around $6,500. Break that down month to month, we have $5K per month. You're taking that in consideration, as well as there are other payments of house payment, car payment, bills, sports, even just community involvement, groceries. That number now becomes less and less obtainable. So how exactly could we as MPA students help and contribute? Well, we first need to understand context. We decided to understand what childcare was through a Oregon Revised Statute definition. This is a synthesized definition that we provided, which we utilized through our report, which is the provision of care without legal guardian and not at a home of residency. Furthermore, we wanted to understand who is involved in this definition, which would be infants 0 to 18 months, toddlers 19 to 36 months, and preschoolers 3 to 5 years. For the sake of our report, we decided to solely focus on infants and toddler care, as that is the more expensive piece of childcare. And further context we received from looking into a Oregon State University report looking at childcare deserts. Lane County is considered part of the definition that they define, which is a community with more than 3 children for every 1 regulated childcare slot. This means there's a lack of supply. In addition, into this Oregon State University report, they also discussed that you could pay anywhere up to $2K per month, adding addition to that lack of supply. So again, the being able to obtain childcare services becomes less and less attainable. So we decided that we wanted to narrow the scope, looking at possibly just Lane County employees, to make some sort of replicated model. This was the sake for time and constraints, but looking into it, we wanted to know what exactly is Lane County providing at the moment. What you see on your screen here is a heat map that we created from survey respondents. Again, we'll get into the survey shortly. This looking at a heat map where the darker green is a more dense population of Lane County employees with children. This is to showcase distance from the 4 blue dots, which are major Lane County offices, as well as the red star being the current partner with Tip Tap Grow. At the moment, Lane County is partnered with Tip Tap Grow, and in this relationship, Lane County employees can have waived fees, priority on wait lists, and guaranteed slots. At the time of our report starting, only 3 were utilizing the 50 slots, but that number has increased to 11. So understanding this context, we also were able to then interview Tip Tap Grow as well as other community partners like Onward Eugene, Quality Care Connections, Early Learning and Care, and many more which can be found in our report. From this, we decided to administer a survey, which Quinn will begin to discuss.
Great, thank you so much. So in our survey, we knew that we were dealing with quite a variety of issues and interests. The question of childcare is vast for Lane County residents and for each individual family. So we want to cover a wide variety of topics in this survey. So we started with the incredibly clear question, what do parents even want from childcare? This obviously had very clear and concrete answers. Also, what do parents value when looking for childcare? Specifically focusing on trust and characteristics of trust. What type of childcare is even used by these families that we surveyed among Lane County employees? Their experience with Tip Tap Grow and their knowledge of Tip Tap Grow. And then finally, general employee backgrounds. What we found first and most surprising was even the type of childcare used. As I go through these graphs, the topics and data statistics that I will be discussing will be highlighted in blue. So what we found most surprising first was that informal methods of care, such as family, friends, neighbors, or no care at all, were incredibly popular solutions to this childcare issue. These were, as we surveyed, the cheapest solutions to the childcare issue, but also indicate a level of informality that can make consistent care difficult. We also found that childcare centers and in-home daycare were the most expensive options and still quite commonly used. Because there are so many vast varieties of childcare, and indeed, you'll notice that these do not add up to 100% because most people use different types of childcare in combination with each other. We knew we wanted to focus on childcare centers and in-home daycare costs because they were the most expensive and because they are the most regulated. With this in mind, we also wanted to have a concept of what would make parents the happiest in looking for these daycare solutions. I don't think this will surprise anyone with any familiarity of childcare, but almost unilaterally, people would be happier if the childcare was cheaper. This is a very difficult problem to solve, frankly, because the question of why childcare is so expensive can be rooted in the cost of rent for facilities, the cost of staff for facilities, the number of children that can even be watched at a time, and the number of slots that are filled. So we also wanted to know what else would make parents happy. What we found was that many parents would be happiest if they did not need to use any childcare at all, if they could care for the children themselves. But they'd also be happier if the childcare program had longer hours or was more flexible, and would be happier with the location of where this childcare program was. This also led us to questions of trust for this childcare. What would parents need to know that their child was safe in someone else's hands? The most popular responses really were about the staff, the facilities, the pedagogy of these programs, and parents seem to be in general agreement with these. But we are actually almost most interested in what fewer parents are interested in because these are incredibly important problems to the parents dealing with these issues. So if you have a child with special needs, if you have a child who needs an individualized care plan, these are incredible concerns of parents and are not available at every facility or in every program. And so these parents, more than almost any other type of parent, will be struggling to fit the needs of their children and struggling to find a daycare facility that meets their family's needs. This may also be important if they are from a diverse background and want that to be represented at the facility and want that to be respected in their child's growth and pedagogy. So, as Mason introduced earlier, Lane County, the employer, currently has a partnership with a child care facility, which is Tip Tap Grow. At the time of our survey, only 3 slots were in use, and now there are 11, so I'd be interested to see how this might change. But a lot of respondents indicated that they do not use Tip Tap Grow at present because it's just too expensive. And again, it's not necessarily that any one daycare is obscenely expensive. They all follow a range, but the range of daycare facilities is on the high end. For an infant, you could be easily looking at $1,800 to $2,000 for one child. If you have twins, you can just automatically multiply that by 2, and so you can get an idea of how difficult it is for families to use these facilities. But there are other concerns, such as the commute, the schedule, or one of our most popular results, other. Honestly, there is no uniform response to why people don't want to use this facility because each family and each child is so unique. This led us, following these results, to lead 2 workshops in a hybrid model, in person at a Lane County office, as well as on Teams, to understand to parents whether our recommendations would be at all of use to them. We knew from the survey that they had diverse needs and desires, and we wanted to make sure that any recommendations we had incorporated their own feelings outside of our more remote survey. So the recommendations that we explored in this workshop were first local partnerships. So would we want to build on a method similar to TipCap Grow of partnerships with other daycare facilities in Lane County? Employer support, how Lane County as an employer might better support employees in the pursuit of care. And then also government-led investment through policy. What we found was, again, that everybody has completely different needs. There is no uniform response to how can we help parents in need of care. But we also found that this was an immediate concern. Children are going to grow up. The burdens faced by parents right now with an infant are going to change in a year, and so on and so forth. Many parents are just waiting for their child to reach the age of 5 to enroll in kindergarten when the burden disappears, but that doesn't solve the first 5 years of this problem. And so any response needs to be immediate to address this. We also found that there's a clear and distinct difference between the county capacity for response, especially at the policy level, versus the state capacity, and again, federal support, and that all these different levels of response would be difficult to navigate. This led us to our 3 recommendations for how to solve this as soon as possible and to create relief for these parents. The first is to revise parental resources in a uniform place. Currently, it's a little bit spread out. It can be hard for families to navigate, especially if you're navigating this while you already have children to care for. And so we've suggested a document similar to this that makes use of online URLs as well as QR codes, because not every Lane County employee has access to email or to computers and needs to be able to access this on their private phone. We also recommend expanding daycare partnerships. So these are, again, filler, but we did triangulate the 3 areas with the highest concentration of Lane County employees and Lane County employees with children. And so we want to expand the number of partnerships available to these employees to accurately take into account the commute from either work or from home, as well as the need to have different type of daycare facilities to fit the different types of needs of parents. Some parents do need support for special needs children and would need a facility that can accommodate that, but not every parent does. And so a variety of daycare facilities would help that. The lastly, and what we are most proud of, is a suggestion for an unpaid leave program that would last either 12 months, 18 months, or 24 months. This program would work that after the paid leave Oregon ends, parents are able to take an extended leave and be guaranteed their job when they come back. This job, their duties would then be replaced either through a secondment of a colleague who is able to take those duties on, or through a short-term contract from someone outside of the Lane County employment. This short-term contract serves 2 purposes. Not only can it fill this position, and so the work is still being done while the parent is on this unpaid leave, but it would also serve as an introduction into public administration for someone who hopes to enter that field and provide more workforce development for people early in their careers through these contracts. I will then address the barriers.
So while our recommendations are tailored to Lane County employees, they have the potential to face some implementation barriers. For our first recommendation, a one-stop childcare resource guide, like we showed on the previous slide, will require staff time for consistent and regular updates. Additionally, without consistent employee engagement, these resources will be ineffective at supporting parents, and privacy risks may deter sharing personal caregiver experiences in something such as like a Teams chat. For our second recommendation, expanding daycare partnerships, funding instability, and providers that may be hesitant to partner without clear incentives may limit the county's ability to reserve childcare slots for employees. Reserving slots could also reduce community access, worsening inequities in a county where we know that where childcare availability is already scarce. Additionally, managing multiple partnerships may increase the administrative workload associated. For a third recommendation, unpaid leave may be unaffordable for many employees, especially single parents. Having employees take extended leave may also strain understaffed departments as they attempt to cover those roles temporarily. And extended absences also risk the permanent loss of skilled and knowledgeable workers who may not wish to return after their unpaid leave. Now, reflecting back to the employee at Lane County we discussed earlier in the presentation who makes the median income in Lane County, these 3 recommendations that we provided can directly benefit their family and their child care experience. Our first recommendation would help alleviate the stress that this parent experiences when searching on their own for childcare resources and information, while our second recommendation provides them with more options for where they can effectively acquire childcare. Finally, our third recommendation of unpaid leave will allow the parent to more effectively develop a nurturing relationship with their child and be more directly involved in their development. Looking forward, here's a roadmap of some potential next steps. Over the next 6 to 12 months, we suggest first review the current partnership with TipTap Grow, assessing its value in alignment with employee needs. Then investigate 1 to 2 new child care center partnerships in areas with high employee concentration. After this, update workplace policies, specifically formalizing our third recommendation of unpaid leave. Also, update and expand the child care resource guide, particularly around informal care to better support parents who rely on their relatives or their friends. Then after this, over the 1 to 3 years following, advocate for state policy changes, pushing for simpler licensing and rural grants for providers to set up and maintain facilities, increasing the supply of childcare slots in Lane County. Also, partner with local businesses to replicate successful models, making childcare support a community-wide initiative. Finally, evaluate the county support annually, surveying employees and tracking participation to refine every initiative to better support parents. And with these next steps, I conclude our discussion on the avenues that we developed that Lane County can take on to better support its employees when it comes to childcare. While our 3 recommendations provide a solid pathway to improving the county's support of parent employees and their childcare needs, this work is truly just a step in evaluating the importance of childcare. It is vital that the effort to make childcare support a community-wide priority remains ongoing, as this will strengthen families, boost workforce participation, and promote long-term positive educational and economic outcomes. Thank you.
Well done, well done. Again, a lot of information to the board. Commissioner Farr, you want to take a crack at it?
I have a job for you. This is brilliant. You know, I think you're speaking to the passion of all 5 commissioners up here for different reasons and from different perspectives. We all recognize the work of this project. And when I say I have a job for you, I mean, what you have done here is brilliant research that pinpointed an issue that really addresses a lot of families, most families that we know. And I would love to go into details. I spent a few years on what's called the Oregon Commission on Child Care, which establishes the rules for childcare in Oregon. And one of your next steps and recommendation is kind of hidden is statewide changes, and that could come through the Oregon Commission on Childcare, and it can be made so that counties don't have to or get to kind of act on their own, that there's a uniform set of rules that is established for childcare. Some of the other things that you're saying, review partnerships, investigate new partnerships, unpaid leave. These are all brilliant suggestions that require policy level decisions. And if we're going to address it at the state level initially and then tailor it for each of the 36 counties, I care about Lane County a great deal. And I care about the people who work at Lane County a great deal, because people aren't at the best on the job if they're worried about the most important thing in their life that's not there with them. And the reason probably that they're on the job is for the children who are in childcare. It's brilliant. I'd love to talk more about it. I have a question for you. I spent last week, a full day last week, with Willamette High School students listening to their policy labs. Not quite the same level, of course, as master's level policy labs, but the same thing. You develop a passion for the project that you're engaged in. And the 3 of you are working together right now. Probably next year you won't work together. Maybe next year you'll never see each other again. I don't know. But really, the passion that you've stirred, in particular for this, keep it, man. And if you can work together, expand upon this. I said this to the last group. They had some recommendations. What are the next steps with the flowcharts, et cetera? For y'all, you have policy level recommendations that need to be followed through on. This is not just college work. This is real-time, on-the-job, I was going to say legitimate, but legacy work that can really have an effect for a lot of people. I just want to really ignite that passion in you, because you have really ignited one in me. Very well done. I'm really highly impressed. And I hope that I can hear more. I hope I can get you a full presentation. And I hope that as a policymaker, I can listen to your recommendations. Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Yeah. Well, I want to follow on Commissioner Farr's coattails on that. Mason, have you heard of HB 3910?
I have indeed, yes.
So Mapleton thanks you greatly. And I want to give you a little story about, the great work you guys are doing. When I was testifying in Salem about that, my computer froze and so my notes wouldn't come up. And while I was up there, I was thinking, man, I wish Mason was here to give this testimony, because you truly were the expert. You guys sitting up here have done the work. You guys are the experts on this. So when you come up here with confidence, knowing that the amount of time that you guys have put into this and how passionate you are about it is it's contagious. And so these presentations really do mean a lot to us. Once again, there's so many questions about the child care here in Lane County. And I think, one of the things you've pointed out is how many roadblocks there are. I mean, we don't know what the solution is, because this person wants this and this means more to this person. And all we can do is keep working and keep our eyes on the prize. And that is, employees that are here at work and have trust that the child care is being done. Those are the kind of employees you want. I was kind of laughing as you were mentioning the a Teams message or something. I was like, oh yeah, that'd be great. Set up a FaceTime schedule like my wife does when someone's watching our dogs. But and I was just laughing like, yeah, how would that, in between naps, in between fits, no, everything's perfect. But that's just, that's not the way it works in this child care industry. So yeah, appreciate your hard work, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Really do. Thank you.
Good, Commissioner Tiger.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. There are some folks in this room who know I could talk about this topic all day and then some. Much like the presentation before yours, it's so important too, because you're really looking at something that's about a system, and you're approaching it, and rightly so, by having some conversation and surveying individuals who are interacting with that system, but the fixes really belong at the system level. Because I think sometimes it only occurs to people to respond to a survey question based on the system we have, not on the system we know we need. And so it was really interesting to me, for instance, to see how many people are using, friends and family or neighbors, which, we know that. But that's really not child care as a professional sector. We're missing out on a lot of important child development work, because the people in child care centers have gone through certification and training programs about appropriate child development. And so, of course, first and foremost, we want our kids somewhere where physically it is safe and the people caring for them literally care for them. But babysitting is not child care, and vice versa. And so it was just so interesting to me to see that huge gap in the response of what we're missing out on in that way. And of course, the infant care is the right place to focus, because it is the hardest to find, it is the most expensive, but it also directly correlates to, again, systemically as a nation. The problem directly relates to not having an adequate universal paid leave program. Other countries, other developed nations don't experience this infant care crisis. But because they, unlike us, who has zero public investment in early childhood systems and paid leave programs, we've created this crisis, which means we can fix it, which is the good news. I was really curious to see the reason, specifically to the partnership with Tip Tap Grow, the single greatest reason people aren't using it is cost. And you mentioned a little bit about how that compares to other programs, but the next highest reason at 34% was a other category, and I wondered if you wanted to share any of what some of those other reasons were, since it was the next highest reason for people not taking advantage of this particular program that we have here at Lane County?
Thank you, Chair Level, Commissioner Traeger. I was very transparent on this one. Everyone had distinct and different reasons. It would be hard to find a uniform connection between the other. I would indicate Tip Tap Grow is a little bit of a newer organization. And so this could also be linked to the lack of word of mouth, which a lot of parents indicate they valued highly when choosing a childcare facility. It's worth discussing that our survey asked so many more questions, and these were just our most pertinent statistics. And so there's a significant lack of familiarity simply with Tip Tap Grow. I think that's also really underscored with the fact that now 11 families or 11 spots at Tip Tap Grow are now used. There is growing familiarity and people are engaging with it more, but parents want the best for their children, and sometimes the best can only be defined by what others think is the best.
Great, thank you. And I know they're working to expand locations too, so that could have an impact if just where people live related to where they're going to drop their kids. The last two really quick things one is, did you look into it all, and this might be something I'll just follow up with James about later. The partnership is about having slots, but have we ever looked at something about a more like portable voucher program that people can take to the care provider of their choice that we sort of sponsor, the way we sponsor slots at Tip Tap Grow?
Thank you, Chair Level, Commissioner Traeger. This is an excellent question. This really points more to the question of how much a program like this would cost. So a voucher would look more at a like one-to-one, dollar-to-dollar discounts at these facilities, but that's not really what is achieved at Tip Tap Grow or indeed in other models like this, because this is a model commonly used not just in Lane County, but in other places in Oregon and the United States when employers are trying to find childcare for their employees. The issue would be if everyone receives a voucher, let's say $200 a month, that can be then multiplied to $2,400 a year and then multiplied by every single person using that voucher. And that's frankly just too expensive for most places to spend. Whereas a situation like Tip Tap Grow, it was a initial like support, a monetary support that got these slots to them, but the same monetary support could not be offered at, say, every single daycare facility, which is one of the reasons why we recommended a partnership with 1 to 2 more facilities, given the outlook on those expenses and the availability of those funds in the Lane County budget.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's helpful. There's still maybe some other models we could look at.
It would be phenomenal. I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
But in terms of immediate response, it did not seem as feasible as other areas.
Great, and then for the sake of time, because as I said, I could talk about this topic all day. The last thing, just to Commissioner Farr's point, I think those 1 to 3 year next steps, again, the structural and systemic look, it's not only about funding. We've had, and Commissioner Buck could speak even more to this because it's in her district, we've had providers who are ready and who have a site and they want to expand and they face challenges around zoning and permitting and building capacity and regulations, and it's a fine balance, right? You want the physical facilities, of course, to be safe and have this proper sprinklers and fire suppression, but we also have created some real regulatory barriers to folks operating facilities that when they're ready to go, they've got a model, they've got families. So I think for us, some of the richest opportunity to really impact at the structural level is in those longer term local approaches to support the industry, if you will, through zoning and regulation and other kind of supports for that sector, in particular citing laws and so on. So thank you so much for caring about this subject and working on it. It's great. It's really great work.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. This particular subject hits home for me in a big way. I'm the only commissioner here that has a young child, and so I couldn't do this job without childcare. And it's a constant juggle. When you noted that there's generally a combination of methods in which parents have to find childcare, I can certainly vouch for that experience. I have to juggle various methods myself every single day. To come up here on the dais with you today, I juggled childcare. It is such a huge barrier for parents to in combination with the prior presentation, to advance their professional life. Not only to just survive and have a job that pays the bills, but also to fulfill other life goals. It is an infrastructure problem. It's a way in which we as a culture have not necessarily found a way to elevate the value of caring for children to the same level of other professions that are equally as valuable. And is primarily, when you work with family and friends, unpaid work. And that is a reflection of us not valuing the work as equal as other professions. Because it's a more global infrastructure problem, local work on it, which we can do, is limited. It needs federal attention, as we need ways in which to incentivize paid time off for young parents, because it is worth something. And that could be extending the child care tax credit. It could come in a lot of different policy parameters. You have to have the political will to do so, and you have to find the financial mechanism to operationalize it. And those have not been in alignment. You can have a great policy, which I think a lot of really smart, intelligent people have come up with really wonderful policies regarding childcare, but it's not in political alignment or operational alignment when it doesn't have the funding mechanism to go along with it. And until we as a culture in the United States align those three things, we are going to continue to struggle and try to find local solutions that kind of move it a little bit, inch by inch. But it won't have a more systemic, real resolution. And other countries, as mentioned, have these solutions, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I hope you or others like you continue to work on this at higher and higher levels within our government, because it is such an important subject. Thank you.
All right, great job. We're going to transition here in just a minute, but I just had a couple comments. Quinn, you'd mentioned that people just want to get to age 5. I know you said that kind of on a sidebar, but it's been rumbling around in my head. And I'm guilty as that as well. I mean, I've got grown kids, grandkids now. The grandkids are out of town. You know, that child raising thing is behind me, out of my purview, not on my interest, you know, for the most part. And I think what you brought back to the table as a focus on family development, you mentioned that, and that it's, I think that's an admirable educational piece to these revised parental resources. I think even those who aren't parents need the resource to understand that the investment in family is a community matter. It's not a survival matter based on, I've already gotten past that and somebody else is in that, I don't have to worry about it kind of thing. Because the investment in family of our community is eventually going to make our community healthier, stronger, and better fit to face the future. So I think that is an important piece that you brought forward to the table, and it's going to resonate with me greatly and deeply. So I want to appreciate your comments for that, and thank you for that. So with that going on, let's see any other comments from the board or any other statements from you? We're going to transition for our next 6 items in the Board of County Commissioners rooms upstairs. We will recess this meeting and meet up there. We'll meet up there at precisely 10:30 if we can make that. We are recessed. Good morning, everyone. We're back from recess on the Harris Hall. It's still Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. We're in the midst of our policy presentations from our partners at the University of Oregon. We're on policies, the Civic Impact Coalition status update. I think the format that we're going to do up here is we're going to have four items 3 through 6 be presented to us without questions from the board. Apparently, the board's asking too many questions, and we're a little bit behind schedule. So if some of you need to get to jobs, I apologize. But we just loved what we've been seeing and thought the engagement was necessary. So if we will, we can continue on with our Civic Impact Coalition status update. And I believe Sienna and Holden is here for that, or?
They flipped. They're at number 7.
We're going to take 4, 5, 7, and 8.
4, 5, 7, and 8. Okay, good to know. Well, there you go. So now we're with number 4, enhancing communication and coordination with rural communities. So it would be.
Oh, sorry. We swapped as well, Chair.
Apparently, there's a multimedia center right in front of me, which I have not looked up and seen. So thank you for the cue cards. So I'm just going to step aside here and let my vice chair take over. So we're addressing the acquired brain injury and justice-involved individuals, which sounds like a great topic. So whoever in charge of that, please introduce yourself and your staff and go ahead.
I'll get us started. Thank you, and sorry for the confusion. Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners, and everybody else in the room, thank you for joining us. Today, myself, Sarah Questenberry, Tira, Omar, and Willis, we are going to be talking to you all about the problem of addressing acquired brain injury and what that means for justice-involved individuals and how exactly public managers can do something about this. So to give us an overview of our presentation today, we're going to discuss 5 things, and they all come together to form a picture of there is a problem and there is something we can do about it. So to get us started with the introduction, here, I'm going to give us a crash course in criminal law. Every criminal law statute should have 2 pieces. First is the actus reus piece, and that is the physical act of the crime. So think of snatching the old lady's purse. The stealing element there, that physical act. And then there's the mental act, which is referred to as the mens rea, and that's the forming of intent. That's looking at the purse and having that intent to grab it, to take it. And this comes into play when we're talking about acquired brain injury. Acquired brain injury is any sort of injury to the brain. So that can be traumatic brain injury, stroke, deprivation of oxygen, anything like that. And it creates issues in a bunch of different ways, behavioral, cognitive, all these different elements that starts to limit the way someone can form intent to commit a crime. So this is an issue for public managers for a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, this becomes an issue with addressing justice. When we're looking at justice, we've got to take into account an injury such as acquired brain injury because it is so fundamental to the way we format our criminal codes. And this is particularly of relevance is because it's usually the most vulnerable in our populations, such as youth and domestic violence victims who come to have some form of an acquired brain injury. Also, we refer to it as ABI for short. So when we're looking at that, we have to look at what we can do, and we would like to say that this is important because there is something we can be proactive about. So to get us started, we wanted to talk a little bit about the literature supporting this issue.
Okay, so our literature review, we looked at a wide array of literature out there. You know, your typical research articles, state regulations around what TBI, ABI response should be within schools, school statutes about what their direct responses are. We also, I think, looked at other types of reports, but youth and TBIs, teenagers, whether they be younger children, are more at risk to receive a TBI than any other population. That being said, juveniles that are incarcerated are 3.38 times more likely than their counterparts to receive a TBI, whether that be while they're involved with the justice system or before. And overall, they are more likely to, if a youth receives a TBI, they are more likely to have that TBI impact them long-term behaviorally. So that can usually lead to more behavioral issues that are, I would say, seen more within the justice system, whether it be like impulsivity or it's more aggression, those types of things. Screening practices, as they currently exist, interviews are usually the best diagnostic practices. It kind of gives a historical overview of the individual and what their interactions with brain injuries have been like throughout the course of their life. Usually they ask questions like, have you ever hit your head? Have you ever, had somebody hit you, or have you lost consciousness, or other things? But even though those are the best practices and those are integrated in some institutions, predominantly the justice system, they aren't widely used. You only see them really within the justice system. You don't see them within schools. You don't see them when a kid is going in for a health check necessarily. They're funneled. And so that comes with a lack of proper resources, and that really drastically impacts self-reporting. Not many people know that TBIs are invisible. They don't know exactly the signs to look for. Or they think, oh, well, you know what, if I hit my head and I'm not unconscious, then I'm probably fine, I'm probably okay, I don't need to go in, I don't need to get checked out. But that couldn't be further from the truth. If an individual, especially a child, hits their head, then they still need to get checked out. And even then, as a child, you can't really, you can't really explain your own needs so much, and so you become reliant on your parents or your guardians or adults around you, and if they don't have the proper resources or proper information to understand what to look for in a TBI, then there is a higher chance that that TBI is going to be following that child around in the long run, and it's going to actually increase their likelihood of being involved in the justice system at any point in their life. And what we found in our findings is that what is really, really necessary for TBIs, especially within children, to be diagnosed properly and be responded to adequately, is that screenings need to be moved beyond the justice system. They can't just be happening during intake, because at that point it's already too late for the child. They're already involved with the justice system. Their behavior is probably gotten to a point, the behavioral impacts have probably gotten to a point where it might be hard to reverse it. So making sure that children are getting screenings early and often, especially if they're doing sports, like surprise, football is actually the most, the highest contributing factor to TBIs within children. Moving beyond the justice system, incorporating them into school wellness checks, like how you do your eyes during school, how you do other tests during school, things like that. And then also having more research focused on youth with TBIs. A lot of the research around TBIs or ABIs is solely on adults that are in professional sports. And I think that says something, especially if when TBIs and ABIs, if they're left untreated among children, that's increasing their likelihood to be involved in the justice system. That's increasing the likelihood that their behavior is going to be negatively impacted if it's not treated. More research needs to be focused on children and how to adequately respond to TBIs that they have.
So a little methodology of how this project worked. We went through three main key aspects of gathering data and how to make it implementable for Lane County. It's the research, working with the Youth Justice Services, with Patty Robb, and then a policy analysis of current school policies of how TBI is addressed. Research was mostly conducting the effects of ABI, which Tira has already overviewed for us. But the next step was collaborating with the resources of Lane County and how to properly implement sources that public managers can utilize to prevent ABI and create resources for them to further address this. The Youth Services is currently partnered with another group at University of Oregon to create a screening tool to further understand ABI and create a database to go through the processes of how ABI is affecting the juveniles who are incarcerated or involved in the justice system. There's also a brain screening operations going on as well. They're currently collecting data, but they're still formulating the database and how to further implement that. We also asked them what they could do as public managers to address ABI and how to reduce its effects for the youth who are involved with the justice. And the best way would be to create better preventative measures and to raise awareness. So that led us to our next step where we did a policy analysis of school systems and how they're addressing brain injuries, how to further address this and bring awareness to both parents, guardians, and the children who are involved. Because they found that many of the justice-involved youths who are in the incarceration system aren't usually aware of when they can get an ABI, or they didn't know it was as severe as it could be. For example, like falling off a bike and hitting your head could have a traumatic brain injury, and a child would not realize how severe that is going forward. And then it's something that should be recognized to, if you have something like that happen, bring awareness to it so you can have an understanding of how a brain injury can affect you. And that's when we came to our findings. It's to better raise awareness for ABI and find more ways in the school system to provide awareness. Current physical education programs do not have, based on the high schools, do not have any formulations of if you get a brain injury, this is what can affect you. The concussion policies for many sports is 3 days off of taking that to see if there's any longer consequences, but there's no further checkups beyond that in the school systems. It's something to further address, and to further promote brain scans within schools or provide medical assistance and services to students to understand if the brain injury can take place and to gather data on that further to create more preventative measures rather than have reactionary measures where they're already involved with a justice system. And I'll pass that on to Omar.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like as for our conclusion, like I will walk through what kind of things that we can do as a public manager, and these are some of the recommendations that we come up with based on our research findings. The first one is implementing the school-based awareness initiatives. So it is really essential because like educators, they are like the first adult that the like students that they can like observe the behavioral and cognitive change of the students. So it is really essential for them to be trained to recognize these early signs of the TBI, so that we can like prevent all these like things early. And we will recommend like co-developing the curriculum together with the public health agencies so that the training is preventive and also accurate. The second recommendation for the Lane County is to have the community outreach, because a lot of like family members, they don't really know when their children have the TBI. They just like assume that it's like the behavioral issues. So we would recommend to host the workshops and campaigns that are targeted to the family members and also the caregivers. It would be nice if the resource guides for the family members should be like would be the multilingual, because like there's a diverse population of the Lane County communities and populations. So we recommend it would be like it would be nice if we can have like the multilingual resources for the accessibility. And the third recommendation is evidence-based collaboration. It would be nice if Lane County worked together with the other cross-sectors like agencies like the Research Institute, like University of Oregon Center on Brain Injury Research and Training, CBIRT. And I also talked with Patty about this, and she said that it's already been like doing, these kind of things are already ongoing process, but we would recommend this like partnership to be strong. So it would be nice if the partnerships can like, if we can build more strong partnership, like stronger partnership, because it can lead to the like creating the development of the tools, like conducting the professional trainings, and implement the data-driven interventions tailored to the Lane County to like juvenile systems. Oh, and the last one would be the routine TBI screening. It is also very essential because like for those kind of screening, we don't really have for the public school. And the only thing that we have, like the Lane County have, is like the scanning chair. It's just like the one chair at the Lane County juvenile systems. So we came up with two options. The first one is like the affordable options. So we can provide the BIST-3, which is like the brain injury screening tools questionnaire, which is just like a few questions that the students can fill up on their own, and we can collect the data and try to like look what kind of like students need the early interventions. So it would be nice if the Lane County worked together to provide those kind of like materials for the public school. And the other one is a little bit more expensive options. If the Lane County has more like resources and the fundings, we would recommend like implementing the advanced imaging like CT and MRT screening, brain screening for the juvenile systems and also the public schools. So the key takeaway for our presentation is early identifications like community educations and coordinated assistance can prevent the students from youth from having the higher rate of incarcerations, and it will support the equitable interventions. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, we will be glad to answer them.
And we're gonna hold questions and go presentations for timing.
Oh, tempting. Good job.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. So our next group is going to be, I'm trying to look at the big screen on the sky, and it's not telling me, so are we going in reverse order? Is this the cross-agency data collaboration? Are we going in the reverse order?
It's about NIMBYism and weather shelter.
Well, there you go. It was a good guess, wasn't it? So we are the NIMBY Concerns for Severe Weather and Cleaner Air Shelters. So who's ever in charge of that, once Jeff gets the slides up, please go ahead and introduce your staff, and go ahead.
You can go ahead and start the introductions, and I will get this.
Hello, my name is Quinn Hout.
Hello, this is Sang Nu Ban.
And today we'll be presenting the question about how to get support for neighborhoods for weather shelters as we look at that in the future. Great. So first, what does it mean to be sheltered? So shelter can be defined as making sure providing an individual with stable housing who previously does not have one. So shelter obviously means someone without stable housing. So what are the key considerations of this? Sheltering someone who is unhoused is a very difficult process because it gets to the root of why are they unhoused in the first place, and therefore what kind of shelter do they need. The difference in sheltering someone in more long-term facilities versus a short-term weather facility are two different processes. But it's also the second question, how can we ensure people stay housed? So if they are seeking temporary shelter, what is the plan if the shelter expires after 90 days or 6 months or a year? Is there a place for them to go afterwards? If not, there needs to be greater solutions to that problem.
And then when we look at the local context here at Lane County, there are like 3,500 homeless people in the Lane County, and only like 1,300 beds are available. So it means like 2/3 of the homeless population are still unhoused, 63%, quite high. And then we also noticed that 14% of the homeless population has increased between the year 2022 and 2024. So when we look into who got the housing, so most of the people who are unsheltered do not get the shelter because of the limitation of eligibility. And then most of the shelter only for like open for like cold weather and only for the individual or like women specific shelter. So a lot of people still unsheltered because of this kind of eligibility. So in order to recommend some of the responses, we did a literature review of what the national responses look like. So the first one is public education campaigns. So obviously these campaigns are to address the needs that the community have, especially about the homelessness. So in some of the cities, the shelter service, they open the open door service, invite the neighborhood communities to see and meet with the resident and staff and ask questions. This is part of the public education campaign. And then the second one is addressing the issue strategically. So for example, one of the federal agencies such as the Housing Urban Development have like developed the policy strategy to address the community resistance more strategically and also like comply with the fair housing law. So this is one of the strategy. And the third one is the community acceptance toolkit developed by the National Alliance to End Homelessness. In this toolkit, it's recommended for the local government about the community engagements and also stakeholder engagement, and then how to address the community resistance prior to it happen. And then at the same time, there are some of the toolkits that designed to address the local issue. It's more like the localized community toolkit. For example, in Seattle, they have like this neighborhood engagement toolkits, which is like the tools that designed by the housing unit for the city staff. It's more like the tools are more like the formats that they can use in organizing meeting with the community members, and also like communication tips to get the trust from the community so that they don't have resistance later after they have the shelter for the unhoused population. So what are the best practices for shelter? So when we say the best practices, it's not just for the shelter, but also to reduce the community resistance. So the first one is the low barrier to entry. So I already presented a lot of people still on shelter because of the limitation to eligibility. So the first one is low barrier to entry. It includes like ID requirement or some of the rigid rules. We have to reduce those kind of rigid rules. And the second one is ensuring the safety and dignity. So the thing is that the people, the resident in the shelter, it's more engaged to the shelter service, only they feel when they feel respected. So ensure the safety and dignity is also like one of the best practices for shelter. And then meet the basic needs. So shelter should be more than just offering the shelter. It should like offering some meals, and then also like shower or other like basic needs for like hygiene, because those are part of the human needs, basic human rights. And then third one is like, fourth one is offering service and housing assistance, especially because the people who are unsheltered and unhoused needs mental health support. So the best practice is like integrate some of the mental health care services. It can be like either integrating in the service or like partnership with some of the organization. For example, here in Eugene, Shelter Care has this kind of services. They support the unhoused population and then also give the guidance to have the permanent housing to the case management team.
Great. So when we're talking about the question of getting community support, it's important to actually ask the community. So we distributed a survey to all the neighborhood associations in Lane County to understand what their response to this question is and how they would redefine their support for shelters versus weather shelters as we look into a future that likely has more forest fires. So what I want to first say is that while this reflects the survey at the point when 11 people responded, within the last 48 hours, 19 more people have responded, and so there's a lot more investment. I will say, as I discussed this, the responses are almost unilaterally the same as this, and they haven't really changed. So first, the main concerns for most people responding to the survey, both the 30 group and the 11 group, are the trash and sanitation and how that impacts the neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods residents have indicated that time and time again their neighborhoods have been trashed either through short-term informal methods of encampments or through long-term encampments. But there's also concerns about the inadequate response to community needs, and including the neighborhood in question into the decision of whether or not to have a shelter in that area or to support homeless people in that area, amongst other issues. But we also asked the question of what would reduce those concerns for the community. Most did indicate that they would really benefit from regular neighborhood updates and consistent neighborhood updates. There seems to be a lot of investment initially when people are asking the question of, can a shelter exist here? But there's not a lot of continued engagement after the shelter is established to ensure that continues to symbiotically support the neighborhoods. There's also then concerns about providing clear rules and regulations for the shelter and ensuring that there's adequate mental health support for shelter users, especially in the case of a traumatic event, such as people whose homes burned down in a forest fire, like with the Holiday Farm fires. There needs to be additional support to those people and additional support for those shelters. And then questions of like security, the shelter managers and employees support, along with other additional concerns. This was a deep variety of people from a deep variety of backgrounds. So our ultimate recommendations to reflect the needs of these neighborhoods really enforce that engaging with community early and consistently are critical. I really want to note that one of these survey results that we asked was whether people would support this, and almost unilaterally people indicated they strongly supported it or just supported it. A few people were neutral, and then in the additional data group, no one was opposed to it. In the new one, I think 3 out of the 30 were somewhat opposed to it, but people really recognize that this is a need, and I think most importantly, they recognize it could be them one day. And so they're willing to support this if they too feel supported. You can see this model best illustrated by Everyone Village, which has staff members and residents volunteer in the community to support it, to clean up, to do regular events that make them enmeshed and not just a separate entity. It's also important to educate and dispel myths around this, around what makes someone homeless, about how they respond, about how they react, and most importantly, their impact on the community. It does not have to be negative, and it is not always negative. This means building trust through transparency about the need to create these, the process to create them, and making sure people feel involved and trusted with this information. And lastly, this means partnering strategically. So you've seen this with methods such as Act Now Lane County, wherein businesses, nonprofits, the government, they're all partnering together with shelters to create a uniform response moving into the future to make sure everyone feels represented and reflected, because there are so many diverse needs with this question, but it's something that needs to happen and needs to occur. We don't have questions, but thank you so much.
Nicely transitioned. Well done. Thank you very much. Our next item up, I'm even scared to try, but I'm going to go out on a limb here. I would be thinking it might be enhancing communication and coordination with rural communities. Yeah. Yay! Buying a Vegas ticket now. So go ahead and sit down and introduce yourselves and your staff, and go ahead when you're ready.
I think y'all can manage that. Oh, here we go.
I don't know how to do that.
It's the sharing thing that's the tricky part.
Well, I'm Eamon Smith, and this is my partner, Lucy Schultz, for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioner.
Let me make sure it's the 14, correct?
It's the 61.
Definitely looks like 14. Was it F9?
So our project was focused on enhancing rural communication in Lane County. And so we'll focus on literature review first, then we'll go into a little bit more of our data and methods and how we kind of went about how looking into enhancing communication in rural communities. And then we look at our findings and analysis, and then finally our recommendations. And so for our literature review, really focused on one question, and that was, how does county governance best manage rural communication? So we really wanted to dive into the work that was done that previous people had looked into, as well as other counties in Oregon, as well as across the nation, in terms of how they looked at rural communication and what they did to enhance it. And so our variety of literature really revealed one thing, and that was community involvement. This was something that was a path that we saw kind of in through all of our different literature, was focused on how are we involving the community, making sure that because of how rural communities are so diverse, they hold so many different people and so many different stories, making sure that everybody that are within these rural communities are involved and they understand kind of what's moving forward within communication. And so one way this is done is through education and transparency. So looking at point people that are trusted in the community, people that can, really talk to everybody that are a part of that community and have that built trust with them is a big feature within building that community and building that communication with a rural community. And one way this was done was through digital proficiencies. So for rural communities, they might not always have the same access to digital pieces of information. So making sure that the digital media is displayed to them through their digital proficiencies was one very important piece of this community involvement and communication with rural communities. So thinking about methodology, we really focused on surveys and virtual interviews due to the fact that we were working with rural communities and working with those in Lane County's staff that worked with rural communities. We needed to have a very broad scope, so we looked at surveys and virtual interviews to get to as many people, as many different departments as possible. That was one of the things that was very important in our initial meeting in terms of scope, was the fact that Lane County is so vast in terms of its work, and a lot of these different departments work with rural communities. And there's not one specific way that somebody works with the rural communities. This is all a wide variety of people that do different things with rural communities. So I'll hold it over to Lucy.
Awesome. So I'll talk a little bit about our survey data of what we collected from employees within Lane County. We had, I think, we sent it out to about 30 different employees here from about 5 different departments. I think Health and Human Services was a big one. Gosh, they're also in my mind now, but we had about 5 that we identified that most of those departments are the ones that work with, interface with rural communities the most. We got 11 respondents from our Qualtrics survey out of about 30, so pretty good. In our group interview, we had 4 participants that were all originally a part of a rural communities team channel that existed from about 2017 to 2021. So I'll go over our survey data and I'll go over our group interview notes as well. Our survey data, survey questions, we really focus on kind of a consulting view of really asking people that work for Lane County, what do you feel about the communication in your role in terms of communicating with rural communities and communicating with other departments? So as we started to dive into this, we were like, there's 2 separate kind of issues happening, but they both really work together. The responses were really interesting. We had a lot of opinions and feelings, which is awesome. In terms of communicating with rural communities in people's individual roles, the general consensus was that it's challenging and it's hard to find resources. A lot of people weren't even sure if that's something they were supposed to be doing. And that they, overall from our questions, everybody almost felt there was a lack of coordination from within the county and that there needed to be direct leadership. So that direct leadership piece is really important when it comes to our recommendation for how to move forward. In terms of communicating with other departments, again, kind of across the board answers. A lot of people said, I don't really need to do it for my role, it's not important. Some people said, oh, I do it all the time, which kind of makes sense since we had a lot of different roles and jobs of people that we were interviewing, surveying. But overall, people did say that it does work really great with scheduled meetings. So we don't want to have a hallway conversation about our projects. We want to sit down and communicate and talk about our projects when they're happening, when we have to. For my group interview, this group, like I said, they participated in the Rural Communications Team channel that will come into play in our recommendations, but they had a lot of really good input on how to communicate with those rural communities. And the biggest piece they had one of them was inclusive communication. So that's using mailers and radio, having physical copies of information in public community spaces, such as the library. Utilizing social media is a really easy thing to do, but like Eamon said, a lot of that digital proficiency does not exist in our rural communities, and it's not enough. You have to go the extra step. Building trust. So we think about the turnover rates of jobs that happen in Lane County, and it happens everywhere. But if you have one person that works in a job for a year and they're communicating with Oak Ridge and then they're gone, then what happens? So you need to have some kind of central leadership position that is constant with that community to build that trust, to keep participation from the community. Lastly, resources and compensation for residents living in those rural communities to participate with you in the county. One member of the group interview mentioned the simplicity of having a budget for postage stamps built into your communications. It seems small, but making sure that that exists. And those little bits also play into, if you're trying to get someone to answer a survey, what are they going to get from that? If you're already, or participate in a community meeting that's at 6 p.m. when they're working all day and they might have to drive 20 minutes to get there. Is there going to be dinner available? So those little things really go a long way when you're interacting with those communities. So our recommendations based on our research and literature review. Our literature review was really tied into the idea of re-implementing that Teams channel and establishing a framework for using that Teams channel in a productive way. So like we said, it existed before, it kind of died out. 2021, what happened, we all know, COVID. There's a lot of changes in how things happened within many government agencies, but utilizing the Teams channel and having a specific person in charge that is facilitating the Teams channel and coordinating that communication between different departments. Ideally, this would be a paid position. Of course, resources are difficult, so we also recommend in that 1 to 3 month or 1 to 6 months, this could be maybe an internship position that is establishing how that Teams channel is organized and collecting the contact information from different people. And then while we're building out that framework, hopefully we can identify maybe a position within the county that is a rural communications specialist per se, or one person within each department that has that in their job, the specific job description to coordinate that type of communication, because it is vast, it is broad, and there's a lot going on. So overall takeaways, inclusive communication, building trust, and having some resources and compensation for doing this work is very vastly important. Thank you.
Great work. Thank you very much. So do we have one more to round out our Grand Slam series of 4?
Volunteer.
This is the volunteer one?
Yes.
Okay, this is the volunteer time paid up. Julian, his guess is the single solo one on this one. No pressure, right, Julian?
No pressure.
All right, you're looking good. You go ahead and start anytime you want, sir.
Works well with others. Commissioner Lovell, members of the board, thank you so much for your time today and good morning. My name is Julian Hernandez and I'm going to be presenting about designing a volunteer time off program for Lane County. So when I gave this presentation to my class last week, I opened it up by asking these 2 questions. First off, I asked, how do you feel after volunteering? And some of the responses I got from my classmates were they felt more grateful. They felt more fulfilled, having a greater sense of purpose. And then they left this volunteer opportunities feeling more relaxed, more energized, and more engaged. And then when I asked them, was it beneficial to your well-being? Every single person in the class raised their hand. These sentiments from my classmates, I think, are the foundation for volunteer time off programs and why they can be beneficial. So when I was looking at this, I was thinking, okay, why don't more people volunteer? And the biggest obstacle to people volunteering is work. This study done by Double the Donation, which is a nonprofit that helps design volunteer time off programs, mainly for private companies. They've started doing it in the public sector, but they mainly focus in private. But they stated out of the private corporations and the individuals there that they analyzed, 49% say that work is the biggest inhibitor to that. So how do we break down this barrier? And that's what a volunteer time off program can do. So volunteer time off, also known as VTO, is paid time off where you're paid at your normal rate to go out to the community and provide service. It allows for you to give back to your community while increasing engagement and having a number of health benefits, but it's entirely optional when we have this in the public service. So why is volunteering beneficial? So there's 3 main benefits to volunteering. Your physical and mental health. I looked at a survey conducted by the Mayo Clinic in 2013. And the 2 biggest things that they said that were beneficial for your mental and physical health is lower rates of depression and anxiety. And then a similar survey done by Harvard said that it's going to lead to lower blood pressure, which is in turn going to allow employees to live longer. And I think these 2 different surveys really harness that there are significant physical and mental health benefits to volunteering. Additionally, in my research, I also found that a lot of employees reported higher sense of purposes and increased satisfaction and fulfillment. And additionally, there are different valuable skills such as communication, teamwork, and just getting the job done that can be applied from your volunteer experience into your work in the government. And then from a volunteering and from an employee perspective, a lot of times corporations notice that employees felt more aligned with the organization's values, and then you can't see it there, but they return to work feeling more refreshed and energized. So this is a graphic, again, from Double the Donation about some of the survey responses they got when asking their employees about similar questions about, did it boost workplace morale? How do you like the volunteer time off? And one of the biggest challenges that I kind of had in this project was all these responses, again, are from the private sector. There is pretty much no research out that analyzes the effects of VTO programs on employees in the public sector yet. It is still relatively new and is very predominantly done in the private sector. So all this information and all this data is coming from the private sector, but I think you can still apply that over into the public sector pretty easily. So in my research, I looked at 5 different county VTO programs across the country. In each of these different counties, I set some criteria such as having to be established for multiple years, have all their information publicly available, and to make sure that it is conducive to all different employees. There is no specific, this is only one department where you can do this. This is the entire county that is able to be part of this VTO program. I didn't screen for GDP, for area, or for size. I wanted to include a lot of different size counties to just show that there are a lot of different examples in how you can design this program. From this, I picked out 4 different key elements that I will go into bigger detail on that are kind of the backbone of how you can design a VTO program, such as time off, who's eligible, volunteering parameters, and how you can improve VTO time off. So time off per year. In each of the examples, I think the biggest difference was how much time off you're actually given. Are you given days off where the employee can say, I'm going to take a VTO day and go volunteer throughout that day? Or are you given a specific number of hours where you have to block out per day? It really varied. Some counties gave up to 8 to 16 hours of VTO per year, and some counties said, here's 3 days. So that varies very much based on the county's needs. One of the other things that I found very interesting is they started it every single January 1st. Some counties hardened and had ideas about starting it based on the fiscal year. However, most counties that I looked at started on January 1st, and that the VTO did not occur year to year. Once a year was over, you lost that VTO for the year. Now in terms of eligibility, you have 2 different ways you can do this. You can do all employees regardless of how many hours they work for the county, or you can say only full-time employees are able to do this. For instances in which all employees were given VTO, some counties had a prorated model for full-time employees compared to part-time employees, where part-time employees were given, say, half of a full-time employee's VTO that they were able to spend each year. Again, it is up to the county to decide what works best for them. In terms of volunteering parameters, one of the very interesting parts that I found was a lot of different counties had different recommendations for where their employees were able to volunteer. So some people said, like King County said, we want people volunteering specifically in King County with King County schools. Or other organizations said that, hey, you can go volunteer at whatever nonprofit. It doesn't have to be in our specific county. It can be anywhere. This really is up to the county, but establishing parameters so that your employee knows clearly what the goal of this program is and where they want you to be able to volunteer is very key in my mind. One of the things talking with Jeff about possible options for Lane County was partnering with groups like United Way or partnering with other nonprofit organizations that can easily facilitate finding volunteer opportunities for different employees, as well as possibly creating a list of acceptable organizations and building partnerships with them so it is as easy as possible for the employee to select where they want to volunteer. And I think this statement of values is really important, especially for the time we're in now. Giving a lot of the options for the employee to select where specifically they want to volunteer comes with a little bit of risk. And employees can choose organizations that might not go with the values of the VTO program and the values of the county. So developing a statement of values to make sure that the organization that they are working with aligns with proper values and reflects well on the government, I think is essential in this day and age. And then approving VTO. So there's 2 main ways about approving VTO that I wanted to dive into. So applying for VTO can be submitted through request forms, emailing HR, or as in some different counties said, going and talking to someone. That all can vary based on what's best for Lane County. And then having your time off approved by someone, whether it be someone in HR, your specific manager, or a specific community engagement person, can all vary. That's, again, up to whatever is best for Lane County. So I summarized all the different counties that I analyzed based on these 4 different criteria. And as you can see here, there is a lot of variation. I think my biggest takeaway from all this is there are a lot of different examples, but figuring out which of these criteria and what specifically works best for Lane County is really important. It's a toolkit, and then there's a lot of tools in the toolbox, so figuring out what's best for Lane County is really essential. Thank you so much.
All right, sir, good work. Thank you very much. Jeff, do we have another one?
Yes, we have the final one, which should be item 3. This is the
Civic Impact Coalition status update with Sienna and Holden. And Nita, there you go. Awesome.
I know we're running over time, so I'll just start talking.
Hey, you know what, seriously, we've got a little bit of time, so make your presentation the way you want to make it and let us deal with the time. Please, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Hello, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Sienna Fitzpatrick. I am a graduating student of the Masters in Community and Regional Planning program at the University of Oregon. I'm also the president of Civic Impact Coalition. I use they, them pronouns. Will you guys introduce yourselves?
Yeah, my name is Nina Polishuk. I'm a junior in the Public Policy Planning Management program at UO, and next year I'll be vice president of CIC.
And I'm Holden. I'm the current vice president and incoming president of CIC. I'm a senior in the undergraduate program with 3PM, and I'm starting the Masters in Community and Regional Planning program next year.
So we're here today to present a little bit on our club, which this is our first year of existing ever. We started at the end of spring term last year formalizing, and this year was our first time actually doing things. And we had the wonderful opportunity to partnership with Lane County through Policy Lab, which made all of our work and kind of the formation of this club really possible. So we're here to present today kind of what we accomplished and how kind of start the conversation on how the club can continue partnering with the county in a way that's meaningful, not only for students, but also benefiting the county and the goals that you all have. So we're going to do a quick agenda summary of our engagement throughout the year, some highlights of our events and activities, takeaways, some things that we learned on our approach and what we'd like to change. Of course, a little focus on Lane County's impact in particular. And then Holden and Nina will talk about the goals for next year as the club kind of continues growing, and open it up for discussion, which I know we don't really have time for, but we hope this is the start of that conversation.
Oh, okay. So here's a brief summary of our work this year with CIC. So we held regular meetings to plan and reflect on our activities, and some of those highlights of the year were the legislative crash course where we learned how to use the Oregon Legislative Information System, and that was a super interesting and fun event. And then also a field trip to the Lane Transit District bus base, which helped us see how public transportation operates behind the scenes. A housing panel where we heard from local experts on housing challenges and solutions, and the Lane County Day event where we came to this building and got to hear various speakers. And then also multiple field trips to neighborhood planning meetings and an event on how to run for public office. And altogether we had 107 students engaged with CIC this year, with about 10 to 12 of us showing up for regular meetings.
And before I get into the highlights, I always realize I skip over what our mission statement is, so I'm going to backpedal a little bit right now. So the goal of the club is to encourage students across all disciplines at the school to learn how to engage in their community, to be civically engaged, and to have a civic impact wherever they live, regardless of their academic focus and their career. We all live in communities wherever it is that we go after we finish our program. So building the skills, becoming comfortable, showing up in front of a bunch of county commissioners and talking about whatever it is that we care about. These are kind of the skills we're hoping students build as part of it, and also grow their interests, whatever the topic may be, if it's childcare, as we heard about earlier, or mobility in their community, getting around using public transportation, whatever it is they care about, being confident, being like, this is my community and I get to have my voice heard. And so a lot of what we were doing is building skills and also building connections. So one of the ways that we did that and also leveraged the partnership with Lane County was hosting this housing panel, which was our biggest event. We were really excited. We had over 25 people attend, and we had speakers from the city of Eugene, Lane County. Thank you to Eric. I know he's not here today, but and we also had someone from DLCD come and talk about the challenges that our community faces around housing and some of their hopes for how that might change in the future.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier, we had a field trip to Lane Transit District's bus space to learn more about their operations and get a chance to network with some professionals working in the public space. And we had a turnout of about 10 to 15 people, and That was an event that a lot of the students at our club said they really enjoyed because they got to see how things really work, and they got to talk to some people in the field now and learn more about how they got started in their careers and see how that can apply to them.
So some takeaways. Initially, we had started this club in the hopes of doing some of the research projects that you have seen presented today, obviously at scale for a club that would make sense, but we found that the scale for a club that makes sense is actually more of the events that we ended up doing rather than producing reports or recommendations, although that's something that we still hope to do as a club, especially with working with Lane County. There's so many opportunities to plug students in, but we found this year, especially as we were building our capacity and figuring out what works, that was one of the things that we were not able to accomplish in the way that we had hoped. But I think we still learned a lot about what students are very interested in participating and learning from Lane County. And we had some really great outcomes. So you know, some of the other challenges were the variety of participation over the term, over the course of the year, as well as cost and bureaucracy. If anybody here is part of a club on campus or a bureaucrat in general, I'm sure you've faced that before. You know, we had great turnout at these events. We were a club, we didn't exist before really September of this year, and we had, you know, dozens of different people show up and participate and get to learn about Lane County, get to learn about neighborhood planning events in their community, and that was really meaningful. We hope to do some volunteer opportunities next year because there was a lot of interest in that. We weren't able to get organized around that given all the procedures that are in place to make that sort of thing happen, but we're optimistic about doing that going forward. And also connecting students through to other organizations, especially internships, which we had to connect to Lane County as interns, including myself and one other in the club. So those were some of our main takeaways from this first year, and I'll pass it back to you to talk about impacts with Lane County.
Yeah, and so here are some of the direct outcomes for our engagement with Lane County. 2 students in the club, including Sienna, are now in internships with the county, and it shows that the work we did translated to real professional opportunities, which I think is pretty cool, especially considering some of the presentations we heard earlier today. And then beyond that, even though we weren't able to deliver projects in the way we initially intended, many of us now have a much clearer understanding of how public process actually works. And so. Okay, there's a lot of words up here. I'm just going to read the first one. We have a membership of about 10 folks that show up very regularly. They all really wanted to be here, but with finals, that did not work out. It might be better given the space in this room. We've included this testimony. I'm not going to read it, but I hope you will get a copy of this slide so you can read these feedback directly from students. This was really meaningful to a lot of us, and we're really grateful for the opportunity the county has presented. And I am one of those other interns. I would just say, like, it was incredibly informative and gave me skills and opportunities that I would not have had otherwise. So thank you. Do you guys want to add anything on that about your experiences?
I mean, it's just been a really great experience to get to not only work with students that are really passionate about wanting to work in public service and wanting to be involved in their communities, but also being able to talk to a lot of the current professionals in the field and hearing that they also want to support students, that they really do care about seeing these students succeed and be in careers that are meaningful to them. For our 25-26 goals, we want to, as we talked about, have a greater focus on doing events and field trips and some internship and job preparation, as well as some professional collaboration, sort of the things that we talked about of connecting with professionals like we are right now, and connecting with other student groups and other professionals around campus for events, doing more of that cross-disciplinary networking and being able to introduce people to these opportunities that may be outside the school at 3 p.m., as well as coming to some more public meetings and doing some service learning opportunities like volunteering. We also had the chance to go to some community planning events, and those were very interesting opportunities to learn more about what happens at the really local level. Then you go to the next one. And then as for projects, if we want to do a project-based approach again, like we did at the start of this year, maybe waiting until the winter or spring term, focusing on the fall term, just doing outreach and networking and figuring out not only who wants to do a project, but who can commit to that project for the long term and who really has that passion and drive for the projects they're working on so we can set them up for success. And connecting with some potential guest speakers, a couple of those events where we had a speaker come in and talk about kind of what their job is like, how they got started, those had really good engagement as well. So we want to be able to have more of those opportunities. And just some long-term development of CIC and its members, giving students more space to learn about the opportunities available, learn about the things they're passionate about, learn about where they want to go.
We hope we continue partnering with you all, so thank you again.
Great. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thanks for not shortening it, too. Good job. All right, I know that we have an items at 1 o'clock, and I think this is our last item for this thing. So if the staff and my board members want to take some questions, do you want to only have one or two? How do you want to do this from now? I mean, obviously, we can be here till noon. What's the preference? Maybe we just do one comment or one question from each one of the board members. Will that work? So now you got to narrow it down. Who wants to go first?
I'm just good telling everybody, great job. This truly is one of our favorite days, and you know, maybe we set this up for about 12 hours next year. No, all joking aside, thanks a lot and great work. Enjoy the deep dives.
Anyone else? I've got just one quick one, and I'm just going to save this question for the Civic Impact Coalition group. You guys are very new, so thank you for starting that. My question was, in order for us to get better connected with our communities, was what would the methodology be of engaging in cross-ideologically diverse excursions? I know it's kind of a mouthful, but basically what would it take for your group to say, hey, we're going to go to a basically decidedly conservative thing here and a decidedly liberal thing here, and what would it take for maybe that kind of engagement to take root?
I think that's something that students are very interested in. One of the events that we had that Nina mentioned was the legislative crash course session, which was actually, I always forget his name. Former Representative Charlie Conrad came and presented to us on that. And that was one of our, I think there were, it turned into just a question and answer session where everyone was just kind of pelting him with questions, and it was really rich discussion. And it was one of those conversations where we're talking about process and how issues that matter to him and issues that matter to us, and then how do we have conversations with our representatives about those things, and it wasn't really an ideological thing. So I think that's definitely an important aspect of this group is also collaboration and conversation, not only academically across disciplines, but across the political spectrum. So I think if there's opportunities for that kind of thing, I'm not going to speak for the future board, but I think it aligns with the values of what the club is trying to accomplish.
Awesome. Thank you, Sienna. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Yes.
You have a great website, by the way. I've been on it.
Oh.
And
The Instagram?
no, it's actually what do you call it?
Oh, on Engage, maybe?
Yeah, it's Civic Impact Coalition events is what I was looking at in particular, and you keep good track of that. So I can say to all of you, brilliant research, brilliant work. I want to hear more from every one of you. I have lots of questions, none with time for today, but I was a freshman at the University of Oregon 53 years ago when I met my lifetime partner. We were nowhere near as good as you all are. It's amazing. So, lots of questions. I'm sorry I can't ask them. Lucy did job today.
All right, Jeff and the Steves, thank you for being involved with this program. Thanks for bringing it to us and consistently bringing it to us. Good job. Hopefully we'll have more of these in the future. Any final comments before we recess for our 1 o'clock, which will be our Commissioner's Business Work Session for our County Sheriff? If not, we're recessed at 1 o'clock.